As innovation has accelerated in satellite communications over the past 5 years, it's put pressure on hardware and software providers to deliver greater performance and more flexible capabilities. While the technology in space tends to get a lot of attention, it's hardware on the ground that makes delivering services from space possible. Last month during Satellite, I interviewed Daniel Gizinski, president of Comtech's Satellite and Space Communications segment, about changes happening in the satellite ground segment and how Comtech is evolving its offerings along with those changes. We dig into what's new in Comtech's Elevate 2.0 VSAT platform and the digital common ground modem line. Daniel also talks about the customer needs that drove changes to these products, like sovereign communications and reconfigurability. This episode of On Orbit is sponsored by Comtech, and I'd like to thank the company for sponsoring this conversation. I'm Rachel Jewett, and you're listening to On Orbit, the podcast that asks, what's our future in space? Hi, Daniel. We are here on the first day of the Satellite Show. I'm super excited to be interviewing you in person. We're in the VSAT show office. How's your week starting out at Satellite?
Well, I think it started out really well, and it's been great to catch up with folks, some of whom we haven't seen in quite a while, and really appreciate the opportunity to join.
Yeah, awesome. I know that you were just at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona last week. You've been jet setting around the world. Tell me, what was Mobile World Congress like this year?
Well, I think it was really interesting in a lot of ways, and obviously, it's a meaningful show for the terrestrial industry. What was most shocking to me was just how prevalent satellite was throughout the show. Probably above 20% of the booths had some reference to non-terrestrial networking and satellite connectivity. And it's pretty clear that mobile network operators are looking at satellite as a meaningful offering into the future.
That's really interesting. Was that your first time there?
It was my first time attending the show. I was blown away at the size, scale, and just the sheer number of people that were in attendance.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been with Comtech for more than 5 years, and before that you were with L3Harris and Sierra Nevada Corporation. I wanted to ask you, how would you describe the changes that you've seen in the space industry throughout your career?
I think it's been really exciting, and I reference back to this every once in a while, but right as I started out my career, SpaceX had gotten their first orbital launch done successfully, and so a lot of my career has been in the post-SpaceX era. But really in the last 5 years, satellite communications in particular has just dramatically accelerated, and I think for an industry that, for a period of time maybe was a little bit sleepy, it's wide awake now, and it's really exciting to see the levels of innovation that are being put forward.
Yeah, I always tell people, I've been with VIA for a little bit more than 5 years, and right when I started was I think there were only the two trial Starlink satellites in orbit.
Yeah.
It was right before the first full launch of Starlink, and OneWeb had their first launch a few months later, so it was just as this new wave of change was happening in the industry. So it's been very interesting past few years. And so in November, you were appointed to lead Comtech's Satellite and Space Communications segment. What does this role look like, and what are your goals for the segment?
Well, so I think certainly a couple of things are true, right? And the first is we really took a holistic look across our portfolio and identified that putting our satellite and broader kind of communications capabilities under one roof and making sure that we're taking advantage of some of the efficiencies, the customer relationships, and the opportunities that we have. It was really important, and I think ultimately we recognized that we've got strong differentiated technology, we've got great customer relationships, and there were some opportunities to make sure that we were bringing all of those capabilities to bear for the company.
Yeah, so if any of our listeners are not as familiar with Comtech, can you just give me a little bit of an overview of the company and how it has the satellite communications on one side, and I know there's 911 terrestrial technologies on the other?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a nearly 60-year-old publicly traded company that really focuses on serving two core markets. And the first is what we refer to as our terrestrial and wireless or public safety business. And that does everything from 911 and emergency call handling, call routing, the services and support that allows for your 911 or emergency call to get to the right place and to get help on the way. We also do precision location, tracking, SMS services and support out of our carrier business. And then the other side of our business is our satellite and space group. And that provides everything from satellite ground station infrastructure, modems, amplifiers, et cetera, IP related to that. In some cases, EEE components that are qualified for space flight. And then services and support for satellite infrastructure. We also have a component, and it really isn't satellite, but provides troposcatter and other multipath radio capabilities for long-range communications for government and commercial users.
Yeah, awesome. It took me, I didn't know at first when I started covering Comtech that troposcatter wasn't a satellite capability. Yeah.
Yeah, I joke sometimes that it's a little bit like a virtual satellite, right? You're bouncing it off of the upper layers of the atmosphere, and it looks a lot actually like satellite communications capability. Just happens to be that you're bouncing the signal off the atmosphere rather than off of a satellite.
Interesting. Okay, so we're chatting here just at the beginning of satellite on the first day. What's this week going to look like for you?
Well, I mean, it's always a great week, and it feels a little bit like a high school reunion in some ways, right? It's a chance to catch up with folks. I think we probably have north of 100 different meetings that we've got with folks. As part of the time here, but it's a great opportunity to attend the conference, kind of hear what's going on, and connect with colleagues across the industry. This is always a great event. It brings in just about everyone, the who's who of the satellite industry, into one place for a week. Already off to a great start, and looking forward to the rest of the week.
Awesome. So I know one of the things you're going to be talking with customers about this week is the Elevate 2.0 and your digital common ground DCG modem line. So let's start with Elevate 2.0, which Comtech announced very recently. Talk to me, what does Elevate 2.0 mean?
Well, I think we announced previously a couple of years ago the launch of Elevate, and really that was focused on bringing to bear best of breed enterprise VSAT capabilities for customers. And Elevate 2.0 is the incorporation of customer feedback and lessons learned from a series of successful broad-scale fieldings. We've got several large networks that we've stood up that we're working with customers to continue to support and to upgrade. We did announce as part of that Elevate 2.0 release that we've secured a large customer network already in the Asia Pacific region, and really focused on supporting higher throughputs, right? 500 megasymbol carriers, as well as very, very large networks with the Elevate 2.0 product.
Talk to me a little bit more about who the customers are. You don't have to give me their names, but what type of businesses are these customers?
Yeah, so in a lot of cases where we see a lot of traction for the Elevate 2.0 product are customers that want some level of sovereign control over the way that they run their network. And there are managed service capabilities on a number of satellite operators that are a good fit for certain applications, but things like water control networks, certain government functions, and then even enterprises that don't want their data commingled with other customers' information have really looked at Elevate as a platform that allows for them to scale these networks from very small up to very large, but then maintain a level of control over what that network looks like, make sure that the traffic that's important to them is getting through.
Okay. Is Elevate, is it the hardware and the orchestration behind it? What physically is it?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So it is a suite of products. In most cases where we're delivering an Elevate product, we've got hardware that we're delivering, so modems, hubs, all of that associated infrastructure. And then really what I think has enabled the level of success that we've had is it's an entirely software-defined architecture, very common hardware platforms that allow for customers to field hardware one time and then continuously upgrade with software over time. Really what I think differentiates the Elevate product, though, is it's a very scalable, very flexible network management system that allows for customers to tailor the network to meet their needs.
Okay. And then what about the digital common ground modem line, which I believe you guys may have announced about a year ago? Is that right?
Yeah, so we had a very broad announcement about it right about September of last year.
Okay.
And really it's kind of a consolidation of several ongoing projects that we had, some of which were internal and some of which were in very close conjunction with several of our anchor customers for the launch of that product. And what we saw as a major opportunity in the market, particularly for defense, mobile network operators, and certain applications, including 5G and TN, was the desire to have these very flexible ground infrastructure architectures that supported very, very high data throughput and also supported reconfigurability or adaptability. And one of the challenges for SATCOM is, by definition, it's dual use. Almost every satellite system is used for both commercial applications as well as defense. Defense comes with unique requirements, security, encryption, some of which are prevalent on the commercial side and some of which aren't. And so building out a common architecture that's able to spin up or spin down on a moment's notice the right set of tools to support either application, I think was what we saw as a core market need. I'm really excited about that. I think in the satellite industry at large, there's a lot of talk and a lot of PowerPoints that go into new product launches.
Yeah.
We do actually have some of the new digital common ground products out on the show floor at Satellite, up and running right now, and we're able to demonstrate relatively recently an actual use of that over a satellite link at a gigabit per second, which is kind of a something that if you've been in satellite for a long time feels ridiculous, right? I remember a period of time where we measured links in kilobits per second and then low megabits per second, and so to be able to do a gigabit per second over a satellite link, I think is a game changer.
Yeah, that's
particularly
amazing
for customers that are looking for very, very high throughput links. Offers a meaningful advantage.
Yeah. What does it mean that it's digital common ground?
So the great analogy that I like to use for this is if you imagine your cable modem, right? You've got a coaxial cable on the back that you screw on, and you've got an Ethernet cable. And really, if you look at a satellite teleport today, it's all coaxial cables that are connecting everything. We moved that all onto Ethernet, and that has a number of advantages. It allows you to take what they call an intermediate frequency or IF matrix switch that's full of these cables, that's very expensive and prone to breaking, and replace it with an off-the-shelf Ethernet switch. But it's also a reference to the fact that the system supports a variety of standards, and obviously the digital intermediate frequency or DIFI standard is a core enabler to that, right? We're moving away from the analog intermediate frequency interface into that digital architecture. It's something that's been talked about a long time. I remember really early on in my career, we were trying to do the same things that we're actually doing today. A lot of core technology had to evolve for us to get to that point. We're at a spot where we're actually delivering products to customers that allow them to support digital IF.
Yeah, I saw Diffie put out a release last week saying that they've released like the newest version of the standard, but one of the things they pointed out was that there are going to be more products shown here at Satellite that are on that standard than ever before, that like adoption is really it's really moving forward. I thought that was interesting. And I also noticed that they have like more than 65 members now in the consortium.
I think people are taking it seriously, and obviously, as is often the case on a consortium like that, some people are there to build products. Some people are there because they're consumers and end users of the products that are developed out of it. That new standard release, I think, harmonizes a lot of ambiguities that were present. Right, we had some conflicting standards versions. Really excited to see that. I would say standardization is a little bit new for the satellite industry.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
We've gone through it a little bit with things like DVB-S2X and other things in the past. But it is hard, right? And the level of support and effort that goes into coordinating standards and maintaining them has had a little bit of a learning curve. I think tremendous progress by all of the consortium members, and really excited to see it.
What do you think was like the impetus that people said we're finally ready to like really put in the work and make this happen?
I think a couple of things underpinned it. The first is as non-geostationary orbit satellites have put pressure on some of the traditional operators. There's a new look at how do I operate more efficiently, how do I operate more flexibly, and in kind of a low competition environment, there's not a lot of drive to improve even when it's there. The introduction of new competition, I think, has gotten folks to pay attention to how do I better manage my networks.
So back to the Elevate 2.0 and the digital common ground modem line, I wanted to ask you kind of the through line between these products. How do both of these products fit within the context of changes that you're seeing in the industry?
Well, I think at the end of the day, I think it's easy sometimes to look at markets as big holistic things, right? And to say, hey, this large player dominates this market. And in most cases, the way that we look at it is we're looking to solve customer problems.
Yeah.
Which often are different than what is the biggest market. And Elevate and the Digital Common Ground are laser focused on solving specific customer needs that we're aware of. And we have anchor customers that are looking to solve those problems. And they're targeted at slightly different portions of the market. Elevate is a highly customized, highly architected, software-defined architecture. In most cases, we've seen this from either government or enterprise users that are looking to have some level of end-to-end control over that single Elevate network. In the case of the Digital Common Ground product, we have a slightly different customer set in a lot of cases. It does tend to be, especially in the early uptake, heavily leaning towards folks that are looking to support multiple architectures or a dual-use satellite architecture simultaneously. So it has the capability to support all of the U.S. and various other allied MOD requirements like FIPS certified transec, the ability to support encryption, to run military certified waveforms. It's compliant with the certification to operate over WGS, but it supports things like spread spectrum for resilience. It supports NATO standard waveforms. It supports then at the same time commercial standard waveforms like DVB-S2X, with the ability to load up configurations ad hoc and flex capacity from one form to another. And I call that back a lot of times to the CASR program that the Space Force has talked about.
Is the CASR program one that you're like watching to see what comes next with that?
So I think we certainly are, and in a lot of cases we're a partner to someone who's building out ground infrastructure in a way to be compliant. And so a major satellite operator certainly would be paying attention to that. And one of the major questions always is, how do I make sure that I'm building out my infrastructure in a way where I can still support CASR without impacting negatively and hopefully positively impacting my ability to serve all of the customers that are there the rest of the time?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Tell me, what issues are you listening for this week?
What issues? I think certainly, a couple of things that we're looking at. I think there's a level of almost paralysis across the industry, right? There's a lot of folks that feel like they're uncertain about the future. I've heard over the last few weeks, a little bit of excitement. I think people are starting to understand that there are opportunities and use cases, and I'm always kind of intrigued to see where people are seeing those green shoots and those opportunities.
Okay.
I'm laser focused on kind of the progress on Diffie and on 5G NTN. There's a lot of tie-ins, right? And ultimately, satellites getting pulled into the much larger mobile ecosystem, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, right? They've got people that have been sitting on these standards bodies and paying close attention for a very long time, and it's interesting. We're definitely coming up the learning curve, but I think by and large across the industry, there's still some gaps and there's still some work to be done to move ourselves along.
Yeah. One thing I was curious to ask you, and we've seen a lot of consolidation among satellite operators, but we haven't seen that so much on the ground tech side. What do you think of that? Do you think that's something we might see on the ground side?
I think we will one way or another, and I think certainly there's opportunities for consolidation, and particularly through the next couple of months, I'm going to be watching closely to see what happens. There's probably a few meaningful procurements and decision points for some of the operators that are going to influence decisions on the ground side.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, it is tough, and we've seen it before. With acquisitions and integrations on the ground side, it's a challenging thing to do, and to do it cleanly and to merge those architectures together. And so I think having kind of seen the bumps and bruises and scars from those things done in the past, people are being very thoughtful and making sure that it really does make sense. And certainly some of the operator integrations have gone smoother than others. Something that I think the ground folks are watching closely as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I know there was before I was in the industry, the merger of ST Engineering and iDirect, and then I covered Comtech when there was going to be the Galat merger a couple of years ago. I covered that very closely. So yeah, there has been movement and things work out or not work out in that area. You recently talked to my colleague Mark for the VIA Satellite story, 10 Defining Moments in Cybersecurity and Space, and you were talking about cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. Tell me about why you think this is important that satellite companies pay attention here.
Well, yeah, this is a point of passion for me in a lot of ways. And I think I made the comment in one of the previous conversations with Mark that I think it's telling that you've got senior leadership from satellite and satellite ground infrastructure providers that are well versed on and talking about cybersecurity. And I think that marks a huge transition for the industry, right? In the past, you had people that built things and you had people that did cybersecurity. And it was something that you just kind of sprinkled on top of the cupcake at the end of the day. It's super important, I think, for us to realize as an industry that keeping cybersecurity front of mind is really important. It's not something that can be thought about after the fact. There's been very big, very high-profile cyber attacks on various forms of critical infrastructure, including satellites. But there's clear evidence that many of those are nation-state level threat actors, and very few satellite systems have previously been thought through with that level of resilience in mind.
Yeah. It's not cybersecurity sprinkles, is what I'm hearing. It has to be part of the recipe.
Baked in.
Baked in. Love that. And what are are there any, can you give me a little bit of a preview of this year for you at Comtech and what milestones you're working on?
Well, I think, for us, we measure our success on our customers' success. And, we've launched several new products. We're laser focused on making sure that not only we deliver those products, but that we deliver them in a way with the right tools, the right supporting infrastructures, partnerships, other supporting components to make our customers successful and provide them with the level of flexibility that they're looking for. That's a major area of focus for the company and something that we really want to make sure we keep our eye on the ball there. We do have kind of a continuing product cadence, and outside of some of the modem products that we've announced, we've got tremendous progress on the RF side as well, moving into very, very high power Ka band, as well as some new launches of products in Q and V band that I'm really excited about, kind of continuing to support the push towards those higher frequency millimeter wave applications and making sure that there's a broad, robust product set available to support some of our customers that are moving up there.
Very cool. And I know you're someone that is really driven in your career, but I wanted to ask you, because this is the podcast, we can get a little bit more personal. What do you like to do outside of work, and what are you passionate about outside of the satellite industry?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I've got two young boys that are 8 and 9. Spend a lot of my free time hiking, playing sports, and running around with them. It's been really fun, and I think in particular the fact that satellite has kind of gotten a little bit more into common parlance, right? We know people that have Starlink antennas or are talking about their T-Mobile service providing connectivity over satellite, and it's been really fun to spend time with my kids, like walking through, hey, here's how a satellite works, and here's how the architecture and ecosystem works. They're really excited about it, which has been really fun as well.
Oh, that's very cool. I feel like people are now, when you tell someone at like a dinner party or something, someone that's not in the industry, what you do, there's a little bit more understanding now of what a satellite is.
Yeah. No, there definitely was a period of time where you would say that and it was a conversation ender. And I think most people now have a strong opinion about satellite.
Yeah. One time when I first started at VIA, I had that conversation, and that person actually worked at Sirius XM radio. I was
wow.
Oh, you know all about satellites. It's satellite radio. Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time, and it's been great to chat with you, and I hope you have a great rest of your week at the show here.
I really appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thanks.